Hey everybody, welcome back to Dodongo Kirby! 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 Dude, you can't do that in here.
Knock
Seriously.
it off.
We're trying to record a podcast, all right? Just chill for a little bit.
Have a little bit of respect for somebody else other than yourself. You don't have to be eating all the time.
Appreciate the art. We're creating art here. Hey everybody, welcome back to Dodongo
Kirby! This is why you'll never be a real Pokemon.
Seriously.
Nobody can stand you. Go in the other room.
Take your plate of food and go in the other room.
Look how clean the floor is.
Seriously. Hey everybody, welcome back to Dodongo Dislikes, another gaming podcast. My name is Isiot.
And this is Birdman.
And I think if you haven't figured it out by now, we are doing Kirby for the Game Boy and the NES.
Yeah, it's going to be a double feature.
Did you play the Game Boy version much?
Yeah. I played the Game Boy version.
I mean, I tried to play it.
Doesn't take a whole lot to get through it, but yeah, we're gonna do both the Game Boy Kirby's Dream Land and the direct sequel, Kirby's Adventure for the NES, featuring everybody's favorite non-Pokemon,
so
the one and only Kirby.
I thought I might have missed one. I played Dreamland a little bit on the Switch thing. I couldn't get past like level. But it's
for the Dreamland?
It's the same game, right?
Not really. So wind it back a little bit. The Game Boy version of Kirby was the first iteration of Kirby, and it came out April 27th of 1992. And it was then followed up by the direct sequel from a storyline standpoint by the NES Kirby's Adventure on March 23rd, 1993, toward the tail end of the NES, which is going to lead into some things I'll talk about a little bit later. But Kirby's Dream Land came out during the heyday of the Game Boy, but Kirby's Adventure came in on the back end of the NES.
Of the NES.
Kirby's Dream Land, there's not much to the game. So I'm surprised to hear you didn't make it through it, because I played that one a little bit as a kid. Not a ton. I didn't play a ton of Game Boy games, but I played it a little bit as a kid, and I played it a few times for this podcast, and it takes like 20 minutes to beat the game.
There's
just not much there.
It's a lot harder than the NES version.
It's a little bit harder. The one-ups are more scarce. You don't have the arsenal of weapons at your disposal that you've got. It's just you suck and blow. But there's only 5 levels in the game.
I think I'm into like the 5th level.
Yeah, you fight the
4th level.
You fight the forest. You go to a castle. You go up in the clouds. There's a 4th thing, and then you do sort of like a Mega Man final stage where you do a little miniature version of each one of the levels, and then you refight each boss. And you have to fight all 4 bosses in a row with the same health bar. You don't get to reset. And then once you fight the 4 bosses, then you go on to King DDD. But the premise behind, and the reason why we decided to do both Kirby's Dream Land and Kirby's Adventure, aside from the fact that there's just not much to talk about on Dreamland, there's just not much there, is the 2 stories are kind of like one consecutive story.
King DDD, he's the bad guy at the end of both of them, right?
Maybe. It depends on how you look at it.
Without spoilers.
But yeah, he's a bad guy. In Kirby's Dream Land, the background is Kirby has to come help the Dreamland people because King DDD took the stars. And now, because he took the stars, there's no food. So everybody's hungry. Kirby shows up to go get the stars back and bring the food back to the people. So a pretty benevolent quest on its face. But
not when you really look at it.
Not when you really look at it, because when you look at the way, especially in Kirby's Dream Land, where you don't get the other powers, all you do is eat the enemies, and then you spit their energy back out at other enemies. And so, did Kirby just volunteer to get at the front of the line for the buffet for food? Because that's all he does. He just eats. So if everyone in the Dreamland just took up arms and fought back, they'd immediately solve their food problem, because everything's edible. And eventually they'd solve their oppression problem one bite at a time.
Is hunger a problem in the Dreamland?
That's the issue, is that DDD steals the stars, and that takes their food away. Like they feed off the stars. Yeah.
Wasn't there something like the Marvel Universe that eats stars? It's like the Silver Surfer Galacticus or something?
I think he eats stars.
He's a planet eater or something. I don't know.
That's Dreamland. That's
though,
Dreamland. And then
I didn't play that one very much. I didn't take notes on that. I played it up to I think I only got to the 4th level. But it's a harder game because you don't have just sort of this huge arsenal of powers. So when I played Kirby's Adventure, I had started by writing down each different power you could get, but it overwhelmed me. There were so many different things, and I don't know what the ultimate count is on the powers, but there were so many.
There's a lot.
What is Kirby? Can we just segue into, before we start getting too into this, what is he, a Pokemon? He's the Pokemon, right?
He's a Pokemon, I think. I think he's an unacknowledged Pokemon.
Oh.
I wonder what does shiny Kirby look like? So Kirby is pretty much pink. He's light pink. He's got darker pink feet.
Jigglypuff or
he's
Chansey.
a Jigglypuff.
He's like a Jigglypuff / Chansey type Pokemon.
So he'd probably be green. A shiny Kirby would be green.
So this is the first Pokemon adventure game where the Pokemon is the star, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if Kirby's a Pokemon.
5 years before Pokemon even came out.
All right, so we're just going to land on that Kirby is a Pokemon because we don't know what else to classify him as. So there's other creatures in the game, I guess, though there aren't really. I mean, there's birds. There's...
You get the Meta Knights.
The Meta Knights, which... Are they in Super Smash Brothers?
Yeah, they are.
They originally came from Kirby.
Now, what
Sometimes
didn't originally come from Kirby, this was something I wanted to bring up, is on the, I think it's the 2nd level of Kirby's Dream Land, you go to Castle Lolo. Kirby, they call it Castle Lolo. They added an extra low. But it's Lolo and Lala from Adventure of Lolo. And they look, it's been confirmed. HAL Laboratories made Kirby. They also made Lolo. It's Lolo and Lala. And they're pushing blocks around just like they do in The Adventure of Lolo. It's confusing because Lolo's the protagonist in Adventure of Lolo, but he's a bad guy in Kirby. It's weird.
But this is another one of those games where everything is trying to stop you or kill you. So if Kirby, and this was I don't understand, if Kirby is the good guy in this game, which we're just led to believe that he is, then why is everyone trying to stop him from doing his good deeds?
Even the trees. Your first boss that you fight is a tree. And then you run into Lolo and Lala, and the stage that you fight them in is called Castle Lolo. So I don't know if they never got out of the Devil's Haunted Castle in The Adventure of Lolo and eventually just went crazy and took it over, and then now they're bad guys. It's confusing.
So the biggest note I had about Kirby's Adventure was the more that I played the game, the more bored I got. Dodongo dislikes that pretty much all these levels are the same. And there are levels where the level is just basically moving across the screen and going into another door that takes you to another level. It's just sort of a pointless endeavor. So I found that to be very boring. The other thing Kirby can do is he can fly. So that kind of takes away the difficulty of a lot of the levels. You just basically fly through the level. So if you think about it, in Super Mario Brothers 3, when you get the raccoon suit, the first thing you want to always try to do is to fly through the level to make it easier, to get through the level easier. Now, some of you out there might be saying that I am just taking the enjoyment away from myself. But if the game is designed that way, then it's not like I'm not cheating. That's just I'm using the mechanics of the game to beat the level, which is
the difference. I think the big difference. It's a good comparison
game,
but I think the big difference is the raccoon suit or the superior Tanuki suit. We've already agreed on that. From Mario 3 requires you to do some pre-work before you can fly. You got to find a runway, get up to speed, and then you only have a finite amount of time that you can actually fly before you have to eventually come back down to the ground. But in Mario 3, your reward for doing something special, like beating a castle or beating a level in a secret way and finding a secret Toad house, is one of many P-Wings. And that is a limitless fly whenever you want, as long as you want. You don't have to get up to speed. At any given point, you can just fly through the level. Kirby has a permanent P-Wing the entire game. So to your point, Mario 3 doesn't set up the platforming of the game to allow, as part of the mechanics of the game, you to just cheese your way through the whole game. You can do that on the levels that you find particularly difficult if you get a P-Wing, but aside from that, you can't do it. Kirby, from the very beginning, says fly through the game if you want, and as you pointed out before, if that's a mechanic of the game, what's stopping you?
There are some levels where you can't fly, I guess, because it's a water level, or they're kind of little mazy levels, but again, most of the levels are pretty much just copy and pasted. And for a late NES game, this game looks like garbage. Like, it's a terrible game. It almost, and I wrote this down. This is what I wrote down in my best description. It looks like you're playing a Game Boy Color game on the Super Game Boy. Like, that's how the color spectrum is. Because if you compare it to some of the other like NES games, this one is just, I don't know. It's drab and colorless. It seems like.
So
which is weird for a.
It's funny that for a late developed NES game, it's funny that you bring that up because I actually wrote down the exact same note. So I did a little bit, I cheated a little. I know that on Dodongo Dislikes, another gaming podcast, the parameters that we bind ourselves to, that we promised our listeners, is that the only material we look at is what's contained within the game, the manual itself, and no external information is brought in when we're analyzing and doing our conspiracy theories. But I did, because the content of this game is so thin, I did go outside. I did a little bit of research. I was curious because I had the same thought that the game feels very drab, feels very muted, and because it's a late release, and because of how large the Kirby's Adventure is compared to Kirby's Dream Land, I was just curious what was going on there, because the characters and certain elements of the game are extremely colorful, but other areas are just very, very muted. And so I found out they pushed the limitations of the NES so far on this game with some of the mechanics and a lot of the palettes that they used for the characters, that I think what happened is they ran out of space for some of the other elements. So I wrote down the exact same comment that you just made, that some of the backgrounds and level scenery look muted, and it's just a boring pastel color palette. And I wrote down that it looks like it was applied to a Game Boy game on a Super Game Boy.
Like, you notice when you get to the end of a console's like lifespan, as you were, and in 1993 we were kind of at the end. Like, the last game made for the NES was Lion King in 1995. So it had a couple more years left, but the Super Nintendo was already out, so the NES is clearly dying. So a lot of times, you see a lot of games that push those boundaries of the original.
This game, like the animations and the play control, the mechanics, there's a lot going on in this game. It's pretty advanced compared to older games, but I think that's probably what they sacrificed, is that background color. It's just very... I'm looking at a screenshot right now, and there's really just a few variations of two colors in the background. There's green and yellow. And then white is supposed to be the sky. But it looks like a Game Boy game, just ported onto the Game Boy, the Super Game Boy. Which is interesting because I think the original plan for this game was a direct port of the Kirby's Dream Land on a Nintendo. But because the game was so small and short, they started from scratch and rebuilt the game. And Kirby's Adventure is superior to Kirby's Dream Land in just about every way. But it just has this very drab, boring.
And maybe that's why I was
getting, that just took me out.
I would get bored playing it.
You take Kirby's Adventure and you compare it to some other late release games. Bucky O'Hare, compare it to Mega Man 5, Mega Man 6. The background colors of those games, there's no comparison. Kirby's Adventure looks like the best game ever made in the late stages of the Nintendo for a colorblind audience.
Is there only one Kirby? Because when you beat some of these levels, like, does he like split, or do other Kirbys come and join him as a little dance party?
I'm sure that they expand on this later, but again, going back to now I'm going to play by the rules. I broke the rules earlier, but now I'm going to play by the rules. Looking just at Kirby's Dream Land and Kirby's Adventure, I don't think there's any explanation as to there being like other Kirbys. But what you can do in Kirby's Adventure is you can replicate. So you can take an enemy's powers, eat them, and replicate that power. So I'm assuming that Kirby is an asexual being that can just reproduce at any time. Because you beat a level and then he just splits into three pieces.
Like a Gizmo or Mogwai.
Yeah, exactly.
Give him water, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of Kirbys.
I want to take it back to something you said before we got onto a tangent and spent the last probably 12 minutes talking about the color palette.
Happens.
You talked about how the simplicity of this game and how that, aside from the fact that The color palette is muted, and that kind of takes you out. That the game itself, the gameplay was just kind of boring.
Meh.
The game was just boring. I found this game to be like playing with Duplos when I want to play with Legos. That created my first existential crisis in playing Kirby's Adventure and Kirby's Dream Land. And that was the realization that this is a game for kids. This is for kids.
It's a child's game.
And I'm a grown man. So playing this game, I feel too old to play this game. And playing this game makes me feel guilty and compelled to go to Lowe's and start a project at home that I've been putting off for years. Like, just be an adult. For once in your life, Birdman, grow up and be an adult. And there's too much self-awareness that took place while playing Kirby's Adventure. I realized this just wasn't for me.
But it's like any child's game. Like, you don't want to play. Like, you got kids, so they want to play like Shoots and Ladders. Shoots and Ladders is not a fun game. It's just stupid and mindless. Like, you're going up. Oh, I got a ladder. I go up. Oh, I hit a chute. I got to slide back down. But there's no point to it other than you're wasting your time. But you're spending time with your child. So here I am playing Kirby by myself with no child to spend time with, other than, I guess, Kirby, who has to be a child because at certain points in the game, a random creature shows up and drops a sugar-laced lollipop, and then all of a sudden you get hyper. If you look down the screen, it says hyper. So really, you give a kid candy and they go hyper. So here we have another instance of a child, and I'm going to let you maybe talk about this a little bit later because this came up last season with Castlevania, but you have a child who may be doing irresponsible things in the land that he is in. So this is Dreamland. So
Dreamland.
Kirby only exists inside of Dreamland? Or is he sleeping like maybe Mario was in Subcon?
Are you asking if this takes place in Subcon?
Yeah, I think it does.
It might. There's certainly in Kirby's Dream Land, in the Game Boy game, a lot of the levels, there's clouds in the background of a lot of games. I get that. But a lot of the clouds are shaped. They look like the clouds from Mario 2.
Right.
A lot of the other elements, the background elements, look very similar to Mario 2. But what about the whale? You ride a star at one point on the Game Boy Kirby's Dream Land, and the star shoots you right into the blowhole of a whale that then pops you up into the air. It's like a direct pull
from Super Mario Brothers
2.
See, when I played Kirby's Adventure, that was when I was sort of really trying to keep an eye out for things that could link the worlds together. Because we talk about the flute. Like, the flute shows up in Mario. The flute shows up in the Zelda games. So we know that those worlds are sort of interlocked in a way. So I was desperately searching for something, just a little bit of a clue that would kind of link the two worlds.
Together.
But I
think we have a whale of a clue.
The whale clue. I don't know if that's enough though.
It's not a smoking gun.
I know, like, there are Shy Guys, I guess you could call them Shy Guys, and they look like Shy Guys, right? The main villain, there's Goombas that have wings. I think they could be Goombas. It's hard to tell.
Goomba-like.
They're Goomba-like with wings. There's Shy Guys. There's those little prickly sea urchin things. Those are in Mario. And they're indestructible. So those are in Mario 3, right? Is that the one where you get the boot?
So in Mario 2, Mario 3 you get the boot. In Mario 2 we talked about how Mario sees Peach and Luigi differently in his dreams, and then he wills it into existence, and that's how they look for the rest of the time. But what we didn't talk about was how he sees himself. Is Kirby's Dream Land, like, we're watching as the player, we're playing through Mario's dream in Mario 2, but is that how Mario saw himself? Maybe Mario sees himself as Kirby, and this idea of having to eat everything in sight, maybe that's part of his
mushroom addiction,
or his own self-consciousness about his weight because he's the hefty brother. Maybe Kirby is the way he sees himself, and Kirby's Dream Land and Kirby's Adventure are the actual dream Mario was having and not the game that we played in Mario 2.
Well, then what was the game in Mario 2?
What we played. I don't know.
It's very confusing.
I don't know.
But anyway, my point in Mario 2, you kill... So the Dreamland and Subcon are the same, so which would mean the Subconians, I guess, I don't know, we never really landed what they were called, but
They're called the Subcon.
The Subconians were the bad guys, effectively, because Kirby's the bad guy, which we'll learn, and then Mario kills Toad, so chaos happens. So when you kill a leader, the whole world goes into chaos, right? So King Dedede kind of takes over for
King Mort
after Mario kills King Mort and leaves the Subcons to leave the land in chaos. I don't know what I'm saying.
I think we're probably trying to make too
stretching.
much. We're probably trying to make too much sense out of a game where Kirby inhales and then inhales again and then inhales again and then goes off to the Dreamland. And we're trying to make sense of it.
If you don't have a weapon, then you can use your breath as a weapon. So your breath will also kill stuff. So is that halitosis? Is this killing things? Right? Because that's bad breath, halitosis. So it doesn't kill them as handily as like having an item or a power, but it certainly does a really good job. I don't know. That's just...
I want to circle back to this...
Just say stupid stuff.
I want to circle back to this issue of Kirby constantly inhaling and then going off to the Dreamland. We talked earlier. This is clearly a kid's game. It's made for kids. That's a dangerous message, I think.
Eat everything or inhale everything?
Both.
Don't spit.
Don't inhale.
Swallow.
I think it's a dangerous message. You're telling kids just to inhale, and you got a central character who likes to inhale, likes to go off to a fantasy world instead of living in the now. I think what we'd be better off doing is having our kids put down Kirby, just say no to Kirby, and play Narc instead.
What about the bonus games? What about the bonus levels?
Love the bonus games.
It's kind of fun, but I wish you could play them more than once.
I do too. I could play the Kirby Claw game.
That's too easy.
All day long. It is easy, but it's so satisfying. If they turned it into like a collection game, where you had level after level after level, and you could keep, there were 2,000 different Pokemon. Put the rest of the Pokemon in there with Kirby, and you could fetch all those things out. I'd be playing that game all day long. I wouldn't get anything else done.
At the end of every level, you drop into an area, and it says push A, and I guess it's sort of like another bonus level, kind of like jumping on the flagpole. I've never quite mastered what the hell I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to just push A once? Am I supposed to hold A down? Or
I don't know. No matter what I do, it doesn't seem to work right. And I never get anything more than like you get 800 points or something stupid. But then if I screw it up, what I don't like is you go onto that first level of Cloud, he flips over the sign, and instead of getting a bonus, it says press A. Like reminding you, like push A, dumbass. You'll do better next time. But I don't do better next time. I've gotten like 4 or 5 clouds high, and I don't get anything for it.
I was playing this on the Switch, so I was bound and determined to try to understand how this mechanic here worked, where you're supposed to press A. So I could rewind it. So I'm rewinding it and trying to press A, and everything I tried, no matter what my timing was, it was just random. So if I held the button down at the right time, it seemed like I could get up there. If I jammed on the button a bunch at the right time, I could get all the way to the top, and I think you get like an extra life. Or if I just hit it once, it also happens. So I tried all sorts of things.
Dodongo dislikes what a narcissist Kirby is. Kirby is a dangerous, dangerous narcissist. In the first game, in Kirby's Dreamland, I can understand the direction that Kirby takes. King Dedede shows up, he takes the stars, everybody's starving, namely Kirby, so he puts himself in the front of the buffet line, he goes out there, he eats everything in sight, and eventually takes care of the star problem and everybody's eating again. Great. In Kirby's Adventure, King Dedede...
Is it King Dedede?
3Ds.
3Ds? I thought it was only 2.
Takes the Star Wand, and he breaks it into 7 pieces, like Voldemort with the Horcruxes. And Kirby shows up at the magic pond or water area that he's at. Sees him with these pieces. He takes one for himself, gives 6 to his buddies, and Kirby doesn't listen to him. And he's trying to stop him and saying, hey, listen, I'm doing this for a reason. Kirby just runs off and he says, I'm going to go get the stars. I'll put the wand back together. So that's your whole Kirby's adventure. You're going back to get these stars and put the star or the pieces of the star wand back together again. Because nobody can dream as long as the star rod is broken. So in the first game, your quest is because everybody's starving. In the second, nobody's having dreams. So nap time's no fun anymore. So you got to go get the rod, put it back together so people can dream again. But mostly it's because, again, Kirby being the narcissist that he is, he notices he's not dreaming. He's not having a good time. He keeps inhaling and he's not getting anything out of it. So he decides to go after. He's chasing down these pieces of the rod, put it back together so he can start getting high again. And he finishes the game, gets the 7 pieces of the wand, and puts it back together, ultimately to find out that what King DDD was trying to explain to him, but he wouldn't listen, in the beginning of the game was, hey, Kirby, I broke the rod into 7 pieces and hid them with these bosses, sort of like in Legend of Zelda, hiding the Triforce pieces and having guardians that protect them, because there's this other asshole out here called the Nightmare who's going to use that rod and basically destroy the galaxy. And ultimately, that's what ends up happening. Kirby does the Nightmare's work for him, puts the rod back together, and the Nightmare shows up, and now King DDD has to suck up his pride, which is something that's the only thing that Kirby can't suck up is his own pride. He sucks up his pride and shoots Kirby off to a final fight against Nightmare, and then ultimately, Kirby gets all the credit because he defeats the Nightmare guy. But King DDD was just trying to stop a bigger calamity from happening, but Kirby was too focused on getting his own fix and too focused on himself to not even listen to him. And this is a classic example of a failure to communicate. And Dodongo dislikes examples of failures to communicate. When we all just look for our chance to speak, instead of opening our hearts and minds and truly listening, we're doomed to make mistakes and repeat them. And Kirby's Adventure is a great reminder that we need to close our mouths. Kirby, I'm talking to you. Shut your mouth. Stop opening your mouth and sucking up everything in sight, sucking all the air out of the room, and just listen. Just listen.
You know what? Dodongo dislikes that you can't combine your powers. A lot of times I played through the game with the sword, so I just pretty much used the sword the whole time. I remember getting hit by something that breathed fire, and I lost my sword, but then I sucked up the star to get my sword back, but I also sucked up the monster that was breathing fire, which would give me fire if I didn't already have the sword.
You wanted a fire sword.
I wanted a fire sword, and I thought, oh boy, when that happened, I thought, oh boy, here we go. This is
unstoppable.
Unstoppable. And I swallowed, and I think I got fire. I don't know what it gave me, but it didn't give me a fire sword. So I don't know. Some of the powers are kind of weird. There was one where I turned into a UFO, and it wasn't a UFO because there's at the very end of the game there are UFOs that give you random powers.
Yeah,
it cycles like a roulette through every power available. But I don't know what I ate that turned me into a UFO. It was later on in the game. Dodongo dislikes that the boss powers don't last. You can only use them 4 times. So I'm losing my sword to suck up the boss's body and swallow it and get his power, but it doesn't last. It only lasts for 4 uses, and then it goes away, which is also kind of stupid. Those are my.
And I'll bet if the game was longer, that as Kirby went on, he inhales and he gets 4 uses out of it. And as the game continues to go on, then he probably only gets 3. Then he only gets 2. And then eventually he only gets 1. And he needs it constantly. That's called addiction. That's addiction.
But there's one of the bonus levels we didn't talk about, which is still kind of relates to powers, is the a museum where you can just sort of get a free power. Did you ever go into the museum?
I went to the museum, but you get your choice between a couple of powers that you can get in
they're
any
always
level.
kind of crappy. There's one that has a sword. The next level has like high jump, which was the high jump actually turned out to be pretty useful for me in a couple of levels. But I don't know. Ultimately, Dodongo dislikes how boring this game was, which I've already talked about. It was tough for me to keep playing it, but I did. I made it to the nightmare. I didn't beat it because the game completely changes into a different type game at the end. So a lot of these games, they kind of build you up to kind of train you how the mechanics work, but then at the very end, like Kirby, it's like a shooter like Gradius. Like there's no part in the game where you're shooting a gun. And I don't know, it's just stupid.
Should we really be that surprised that Kirby's Dream Land and Kirby's Adventure aren't that fun to play? Like, Kirby is the only one who's having a good time.
I don't think so.
Have you ever had to be the designated driver and you're hanging around, all your friends are drunk and you're the only one that's sober? Like, Kirby's inhaling all day and we just have to put up with it. Of course we're not having any fun.
No, he's getting to do all the fun things.
He's having all the fun. He's in his own dreamland the entire time and we're stuck in reality.
Well, it goes back to the child. It's a child's game. Like, I remember playing when I was a kid Hi-Ho Cherry-O, and I loved that game. But it was effectively, you spin the stupid little spinner. It tells you how many cherries to pick off the tree, and you put them in your little bucket. And at the end of the game, when all the cherries are picked off the tree, whoever has the most cherries in their bucket wins.
That sounds
I
more
love
fun
that
than
game
Kirby.
as a kid. Huh?
So that sounds more fun than Kirby.
Yeah, but it's just, I couldn't play that now. It just, I don't know. It's just.
But, so, okay. I did have to take a step back, because I felt exactly the same way about this game. But I had to take a step back and look at the mechanics of this game, the layouts of the levels. Let's put Kirby's Dream Land on the. We're done with it. We'll put that on the back on the side, because that game is so short, and it's a Game Boy game. It's a short Game Boy game, and Kirby's Adventure is where the majority of the meat comes from, because it's a relatively long game. I'd say it's about as long as Mario 3. It's got about as many levels. The levels are laid out kind of similarly to a Mario style game. You've got as many powers as you would in a Mega Man game. It's a late NES release. I know we complained about the colors of the background, but overall the game is fairly colorful. The sprites are good. The mechanics are good. You get a lot of powers. There's a lot of diversity. I think if this game had come out in 1989 versus coming out in 93, when I'd already moved on to the SNES, I think this game would have been a classic for me. It's got all the elements. And we did a lot of complaining about it, but we complained about it based on our experience through today's lens and not our experiences we had back in the 80s. And I can't help but wonder, is this what it's like for current generations to play all these classic older NES games that we gush about secretly, but we rip on through the testament of Dodongo? And that kind of opened my eyes in a really bad way. So ironically, Kirby's plan was to make sure we can all rest and dream again, but instead he did open my eyes, and I've never been more sober and aware. All the magic, nostalgia, and the dreams of my past washed away playing this game, and I see these old games, these old classic games that I love, for what they are. They're just old games. So Kirby, you've shown me the truth, and I don't like it. I just want to dream again. And Kirby, you stole that from me.
This has been another episode of Deep Thoughts with Birdman. So let me ask you this. You said classic game. Was Kirby a classic game?
But so that's my point. I think it would be if it didn't come out so late.
So
this was the lost era of Nintendo.
Yeah.
And nobody was playing the NES when this game came out.
Where did Kirby get his popularity from? When was the game that put Kirby on the map? If it wasn't this game,
it was Kirby's Dream Land, because in 92 people were playing the Game Boy. And it's a short game, but it's a pretty good game for a Game Boy game. I think Kirby's Adventure, don't get me wrong, it sold very well. It's something like 1.5 million copies. And that's why, even though this game came out at the same time as things like Mega Man 5 and Bucky O'Hare and Little Samson, games that are hundreds, thousands of dollars because they came out during that period where NES was ramping down, they still made a ton of copies of Kirby's Adventure. So it's not hard to get a hold of. It sold well. So it was popular enough, but it was popular, I think, to whoever was playing Nintendo in 1993, and I wasn't. I was playing Super Mario World, and
Yeah.
I was playing the Super Nintendo. So it just wasn't a part of my childhood. I don't have that kind of attachment to it. But I think there's probably a generation just slightly behind us who love Kirby as much as they love. I mean, he's super popular.
Yeah, I don't know. He was never one of my favorites. I maybe slightly remember playing it on the Game Boy, but I don't think I ever played it on the NES. I always just thought they were the same game. If you were to ask me, I would have said, well, the Game Boy version is just a port of the adventure game, which is not true at all.
But I still maintain, I think you and I would be
fun.
gushing over Kirby if this game was like a 1987
Do you think?
game. Yeah, I think so. It's all there.
I don't know. It's still kind of boring.
It is boring, but how boring would Mario 2 be if you didn't have that muscle memory created already around the game? Like, when you pick up Mario 2 to play for the podcast and you already knew where you were going and what you were doing. Like, there's some things you see, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that was here. But by and large, it's sort of like watching Star Wars. You could almost close your eyes, hit it on pause, and then just play through the movie in your head. I don't know if that fills some gaps.
I know there's a lot of secret stuff in Kirby's, and because you can see where there's stuff that you can't get to. There's giant buttons that you push that activate something somewhere else. There's parts where you have to have Fire Kirby, where you light the fuse and then you run to the cannon. I never did any of that. Like, I just didn't care. By the time I got there, I was so overwhelmed with my boredom. I didn't care. Like, when I first saw that cannon thing, I jump in it. I'm like, okay, something's supposed to happen, right? Because I'm jumping in a cannon. And then I saw that there was a fuse, and it popped up out of the ground somewhere. I was like, oh, I guess I need the Fire Kirby. Well, now I got to go back and backtrack to get fire. Well, how do I backtrack and get fire? Well, I can't. I got to beat the level. And then I got to go find fire somewhere, and then come back to this level with fire. And it's just like, I'm already bored at this point. It's just, what could possibly be on the other side of this cannon that's going to make me glad that I spent the last 20 minutes hunting down fire?
Was it worth it?
Coming back. I don't know. I never did it.
But see, it's interesting, though, because that's the same kind of mechanic that we talked about when we talked about Tears of the Kingdom. And one of the things we mentioned in Tears of the Kingdom is that you've got everything you need to access everything you want to access in all of Hyrule from the moment you get down to the surface of Hyrule, versus the old Legend of Zelda games where you have to re-explore areas with new items that you didn't have before to get a heart piece that you couldn't go after before. And we loved that about the Zelda games. Well, Kirby does the same thing, and you got to go collect something, come back and experience the world, the same world, but in a different way, and we hate it.
Here's the difference. The difference is I'm having fun throughout that process. It's like with Kirby, I'm bored up to the cannon. I'm bored after the cannon. There's nothing that's exciting me with the gameplay that's making me want to go on this separate adventure, because it's going to be a separate adventure of boredom, recovering the levels that have already bored me to get fire, to come back and to do what? What happens? Have you launched yourself in the cannon? Like, what happens?
No, I didn't bother with it. But
exactly.
But let me ask you this: is it because the mechanics are boring, or is it because when you play Zelda or Mario, regardless of when the game came out, because you grew up with Zelda and Mario, any Zelda or Mario game you play, are you playing it as a 12-year-old again, versus when you play Kirby, you're playing it for the first time as not a 12-year-old?
An adult. Well, I mean, there's something to be said for growing up with a game. I get that. Kirby, I can't say that it was ever, I don't know what's saying. I can't say anything. I don't like Kirby. It's a boring game.
So that's
I got lost.
That's what's destroying me right now, is I've completely lost myself this game has caused me to look inward, and it's ruined retro gaming for me forever, I think.
I almost forgot what we were talking about. I get distracted by Zelda with my rose-colored Zelda glasses, and then we're talking about Kirby, but again, I don't want to go back and play it. So with Link, right? So Legend of Zelda, let's say I can't get past that door because I need to go hunt down a bomb. Fine. I go kill a bunch of monsters, earn money. I enjoy doing that stuff. With Kirby, there was no sense of adventure. Like, I wasn't on an adventure. I was inhaling a big gasp of air, flying over everything, because it just wasn't fun. And I guess maybe the flying part really took a lot out of it for me. Like, if I could just fly over stuff, it takes out the fun. Like, I can jump, but I can also fly. Well, what do I need to jump if I can fly? It's just not a great game for me. And maybe it has something to do with the era where it kind of came out after Super Nintendo came out, and we all moved on to Super Nintendo. For me, Kirby, I don't think Kirby really existed until Super Smash Brothers in my eyes. Now, I knew he was there, but
didn't care.
Yeah, I didn't care. I still don't care.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby gets a lot of powers. You can do a lot of special things, but at the heart of it all, Kirby sucks.
Are we ready to bomb Kirby?
Yeah, let's bomb this masterpiece and move on.
You want me to go first? You went first last time, right? Like, it doesn't really matter who goes first, but we always argue about it seems like. So I'm just going to give Kirby I'm going to put him right in the middle, 2.5 bombs. Listen, for me, for my tastes, as an adult, it's not a great game. Maybe have one of your kids play it and see how they feel about it. Or are we just sort of past that world where we can sit a kid down these days and be like, play this old game and tell me what you think about it? Part
of what kind of opened my eyes on this is that the kids do like Kirby. They like Dreamland. They like Kirby's Adventure.
Well, there you go.
And they like the newer Kirby's too. I like it because it's a game that a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old can actually sit down and play without getting frustrated. We yesterday picked up 102 Dalmatians for the Dreamcast because one of the girls is just absolutely over the moon about the Dalmatian movies right now. So they want to play 102 Dalmatians.
On the Dreamcast.
On the Dreamcast. And obviously, it's 102 Dalmatians. You're running around as a puppy collecting bones, trying to collect other puppies, and then there's a boss fight later. You have to fight Cruella de Vil in like a helicopter thing. It is a game that has to be intended for children. It has to be. No adult would ever want to play this game, but it is so hard that she just lost her mind about 15 minutes into it. Starting off the game, the first little intro level, she was just absolutely just enamored with it. Loved the game. Having so much fun collecting the bones because it was sort of like an Easter egg hunt to begin with, but an Easter egg hunt for a little kid where the Easter eggs are just laid in the grass. And she could run around and just grab all the dog bones, chase after the dogs. By the time she got to the second level, the difficulty was ramped up so significantly that it was basically just her watching me play because she didn't want to be done with it, but she was done losing.
Right.
And I wanted to be done with it because it was just mind-numbingly awful, but also incredibly difficult. What I like about Kirby is that it's a game for kids that kids can play without just getting frustrated and pissed off and throwing the controller down. And the difficulty ramps up a little bit, but not enough that a kid of that age will lose interest before the game gets so difficult they can't play it. Looking at it for what it is, I gave it 4 bombs.
4 bombs.
And then because it ruined retro gaming for me for the rest of my life, I took a bomb away. So
3 bombs.
3 bombs.
So I think after listening to your dissertation on Kirby and 102 do you have a Dreamcast?
Yeah.
Look at you.
Yeah, the Dreamcast is the 32X that I have. I think on the last episode, you said you have a 32. You have a 32X? Right. I was like, oh, yeah, I got one. We went back and listened to it. We were editing. I was like, oh, that's a lie. I don't have a 32X. Now I feel compelled to get one so that I turn myself not into a liar. But no, our 32X is actually a Dreamcast.
Here's the thing. I'm sticking at 2.5 bombs, but I think as far as Kirby's Adventure and Kirby's Dreamland goes, and relation to gaming and young children, I think it's a good gateway drug because it's easy enough for a kid to pick up. They'll play it. They think they're good at it. They'll enjoy playing it, and they'll do it more. They'll get more and more and more and more. More games, more enjoyment, and then at the end...
So you're telling the kids to go out there and inhale some Kirby.
All right, everybody, that's about going to wrap it up for Dodongo Dislikes, another gaming podcast take on Kirby's Adventure and Kirby's Dreamland. Follow us on our socials. We're on Facebook at Dodongo Dislikes, and we're on TikTok at
Dodongo Dislikes AGP at Dodongo.dislikes.
Kirby!
All right. Do this. I just need to be really whiny about it.
You don't have to whine.
I want to whine.
All right, well, whine.